Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into one of the most surprising stories in American automotive history, a tale that even seasoned car enthusiasts tend to forget. We're talking about the day a modest four-door sedan from a struggling company showed up at Daytona Beach and left the automotive establishment speechless. This is the story of the 1957 Rambler Rebel, the car that beat nearly everything on wheels in straight-line acceleration, including America's sports car darling. Stick around, because what happened in the spring of 1957 changed how Detroit thought about performance forever. The world of 1957. To understand why the Rebel mattered, you need to understand 1957. This was the height of the horsepower wars. Chrome was king, tail fins reached for the sky, and bigger meant better. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler were locked in a brutal competition, each trying to outdo the other with more cubic inches, more horses, and more flash. That February, Daytona Beach hosted its annual Speed Week trials. This wasn't NASCAR as we know it today. These were standing start acceleration runs and top speed trials held right on the hard-packed sand. The big manufacturers brought their finest. Chrysler had the legendary 300C with its 392 Hemi pumping out 375 horsepower. Pontiac came with specially prepared Bonnevilles. Ford brought Thunderbirds. Chevrolet showed up with the all-new Corvette, equipped with Rochester fuel injection, rated at 283 horsepower and capable of 1 horsepower per cubic inch, a remarkable engineering achievement at the time. The atmosphere was electric. Journalists from Motor Trend, Sports Illustrated, and Hot Rod magazine crowded the beach. Factory teams had massive budgets and professional drivers. This was where reputations were made and advertising campaigns were born. Then, almost as an afterthought, 2 engineers from American Motors Corporation rolled up in a silver 4-door hardtop that most folks wouldn't have looked at twice in a parking lot. The company on the edge. Let's talk about American Motors for a moment, because their story makes what happened at Daytona even more remarkable. AMC was formed in 1954 when Nash Kelvinator merged with Hudson Motor Car Company. It was the largest corporate merger in automotive history up to that point, born out of desperation as much as ambition. By 1957, AMC was hemorrhaging money. They'd lost nearly $12 million in 1956 and were on track to lose more in 1957. The company was so strapped for cash that the 5 highest-paid executives took voluntary salary cuts averaging nearly 26%. Workers wondered if they'd have jobs come spring. At the helm was George W. Romney. Yes, father of the future Michigan governor and presidential candidate Mitt Romney. Romney was a Mormon missionary turned automobile executive, and he had a vision that went against everything Detroit believed in. While the Big Three built what he called gas-guzzling dinosaurs, Romney preached the gospel of the compact car. He believed Americans wanted sensible, economical transportation, not oversized behemoths. It was a tough sell. In 1957, cheap gasoline was flowing, the economy was booming, and Americans wanted size and power. Romney's Rambler was seen as sensible, sure, but sensible didn't sell cars. The company was fighting for survival. The birth of the Rebel. Here's where 2 AMC engineers, Jim Moore and Carl Chakmakian, had an idea. AMC had just introduced a new V8 engine family for 1957. The basic 250 cubic inch version made 190 horsepower and was intended for the Rambler line. But they'd also developed a larger 327 cubic inch version rated at 255 horsepower, designed for the big Nash Ambassador and Hudson Hornet models. Moore and Chakmakian looked at that big engine and looked at the lightweight Rambler 4-door hardtop riding on a 108-inch wheelbase. They did the math. The Rambler, with its unibody construction, weighed just 3,255 pounds at the curb, hundreds of pounds lighter than the big Detroit sedans. What if they dropped that 327 into the compact Rambler? AMC management gave them the green light to build a limited production run. The result was christened the Rebel, and it represented something genuinely new, a mid-sized car with a big car engine. This formula, light body, powerful motor, would later become the blueprint for every muscle car of the 1960s. The Rebel beat the Oldsmobile 88 and the Pontiac GTO to market by years. The specifications. Let's get technical for a moment because the Rebel specifications tell the story. That 327 cubic inch V8 featured overhead valves, a 4-barrel carburetor, and dual exhausts. It produced 255 horsepower at 4,700 RPM and a healthy 340 pound-feet of torque at 2,600 RPM. That torque figure is key. It meant strong, immediate power delivery right where you needed it for acceleration. The Rebel came standard with a 3-speed manual transmission with overdrive, though buyers could opt for a GM Hydra-Matic 4-speed automatic. Power steering and power brakes came standard. This was a well-equipped car, not some stripped-down racer. AMC also upgraded the suspension with heavy-duty Gabriel shocks, beefier anti-roll bars, and stiffer springs to handle the additional power. Here's what made it special: that power-to-weight ratio. At roughly 13 pounds per horsepower, the Rebel had the kind of numbers that made performance possible. Compare that to the Chrysler 300C, which made more horsepower but weighed considerably more, or even the Corvette, which was lighter but ran a smaller engine in carbureted form. The Rebel was available in just one body style, that 4-door custom hardtop, and just one color combination, metallic silver with gold anodized aluminum trim along the sides. It wasn't trying to look fast. It just was fast. Daytona Beach, 1957. When Moore and Chakmakian rolled the Rebel onto Daytona Beach that February, nobody paid much attention. The journalists and factory teams were focused on the big players. This was a Rambler after all, a car your neighbor's wife drove to the grocery store. Motor Trend magazine's editor, Joe Wary, decided to give it a run. What happened next became automotive legend. Wary lined up the Rebel for a standing start acceleration test. The rear tires bit into the sand, and that 327 roared to life. The car lunged forward with authority. When the results came back, people checked the timing equipment. The Rebel had run 0 to 60 miles per hour in 7.5 seconds flat. That number needs context. In 1957, that was seriously fast. The vaunted Chrysler 300C, with 120 more horsepower, couldn't match it. Neither could the Pontiac Bonneville. The only production car that beat the Rebel that week was the fuel-injected Corvette, which managed the sprint in 6.6 seconds. Think about that. A 4-door family sedan from a nearly bankrupt company had just outrun every other sedan in America and finished second only to America's premier sports car. The Rebel also posted an 18.32-second quarter-mile time at over 80 miles per hour. The timing slip didn't lie, and word spread fast. Racing drivers who'd been ignoring the silver Rambler suddenly wanted to see it run. Some drivers reportedly refused to race against the gray Rebels because they knew they'd lose. The fuel injection dream. There's a fascinating footnote to the Rebel story that never quite happened. AMC had planned to offer the Rebel with Bendix electrojector electronic fuel injection. This wasn't carburation, this was cutting-edge technology, one of the first attempts at electronic fuel injection in a production car. With the electrojector system, the engine was rated at 288 horsepower. Promotional materials showed the system, and at the Chicago Auto Show, a banner proclaimed the fuel-injected Rebel's power. Motor Trend magazine even reported that the fuel-injected version could beat the Corvette in acceleration trials. But the electrojector wasn't ready for prime time. The system suffered from reliability and production problems. AMC had to cancel the option before any cars reached customers. Some test vehicles may have been built, but if they still exist, they've never surfaced. It remains one of the great what-ifs of automotive history. Even without fuel injection, though, the carbureted Rebel was fast enough to make headlines. The marketplace reality. Motor Trend magazine was enthusiastic. They called it a car with the quality and performance of many more costly cars and praised its space, personality, and construction. Editor Joe Wary predicted that hot rodders would start building their own Rebelized Ramblers by dropping 327 engines into standard Rambler bodies. The pricing was reasonable too. At $2,186, the Rebel cost about $360 more than a standard V8 Rambler custom hardtop. That was less than a Plymouth Fury at $2,125, though more than a Chevrolet Bel Air. For the performance delivered, it represented good value. But history proved Wary wrong. Americans didn't rush to buy the Rebel. AMC built exactly 1,500 of them for the 1957 model year, and that was it. For 1958, the Rebel name continued, but attached to standard Ramblers with the smaller 250 cubic inch engine. The high-performance version was gone after just 1 year. Why didn't it catch on? Timing, mostly. This was still 1957, before the muscle car boom really took off. The 1964 Pontiac GTO is usually credited with starting that craze, but the Rebel had pioneered the formula 7 years earlier. Americans in 1957 weren't quite ready for a performance sedan from a company known for economy cars. The Rambler's image worked against it. Also, that four-door only configuration limited appeal. Performance buyers wanted two-door hardtops or convertibles, not four-door family sedans, no matter how fast they were. And AMC's dealer network couldn't match the Big Three's reach. The legacy. The 1957 Rambler Rebel deserves recognition as a genuine innovator. It proved that a smaller independent automaker could compete with Detroit's giants on performance. It demonstrated that lightweight and smart engineering could overcome raw displacement, and it established the muscle car formula years before anyone called it that. More broadly, the Rebel showed that American motors could think differently. While Romney publicly promoted economy and practicality, his engineers built a car that could hang with the best Detroit offered. That same independent thinking would later produce the AMC Javelin, the AMX, and the outrageous Rebel machine in 1970, a direct descendant wearing the same name. For collectors today, the 1957 Rebel is rare and desirable. Only 1,500 were built, and far fewer survive. When they do come up for sale, they typically command prices around $25,000 to $30,000, depending on condition. That's reasonable for a piece of automotive history this significant. The car also influenced the industry in ways that aren't always recognized. When Pontiac dropped the 389 into the Tempest to create the GTO in 1964, they were following the Rebel's playbook: big engine, mid-sized platform, unexpected performance. The Rebel proved it could work. The aftermath at AMC for American Motors, the Rebel's performance at Daytona provided a brief moment in the sun, but it didn't solve the company's fundamental problems. AMC continued to struggle financially through 1957, losing another $11.8 million that year. Romney responded by doubling down on his compact car strategy. He traveled 70,000 miles in 12 months, speaking anywhere people would listen: union halls, churches, fairgrounds, radio and television stations. He preached his message about sensible transportation and the evils of oversized automobiles. The gamble paid off, but not because of performance cars. When the U.S. economy slipped into recession in 1958, suddenly, Romney's compact Ramblers looked brilliant. While overall car sales dropped 30%, AMC's sales actually increased. The company posted its first quarterly profit in 3 years. By 1960, Rambler had become the third best-selling car brand in America, behind only Ford and Chevrolet. Romney left AMC in 1962 to enter politics, eventually serving as Michigan's governor. The company he saved continued for another 2 decades, producing memorable cars like the Javelin and the AMX, before Chrysler acquired it in 1987, primarily for the Jeep brand. The horsepower wars context. The Rebel's moment came during a pivotal time in American automotive history. The horsepower wars of the 1950s were reaching their peak, but they were also about to face their first major challenge. In May 1957, just months after the Daytona trials, tragedy struck. At a NASCAR race at Martinsville Speedway in Virginia, driver Billy Myers crashed his Mercury through a fence into a spectator area. 5 people were injured, including an 8-year-old boy who later died. The accident sent shockwaves through the industry and Congress. The Automobile Manufacturers Association, under pressure from safety advocates and politicians, issued a resolution in June 1957 recommending that member companies withdraw from racing and stop using racing results in advertising. General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler agreed to back away from direct factory involvement in motorsports. The ban didn't stick forever. By the 1960s, manufacturers were back in racing with a vengeance. But for AMC, already struggling financially, it meant their brief moment of glory at Daytona couldn't be properly exploited. They couldn't advertise the Rebel's Daytona success the way Chrysler might have promoted a 300C victory. The technical achievement, from an engineering standpoint, the Rebel represented sound thinking. That 327 V8 wasn't just a bored-out version of the smaller engine. AMC had designed it with mechanical valve lifters instead of hydraulic units, allowing for higher RPM operation. The compression ratio was increased. The 4-barrel carburetor was carefully calibrated. The unibody construction of the Rambler platform, while unconventional for American cars of the era, provided rigidity and saved weight compared to traditional body-on-frame designs. This construction method, pioneered by Nash in earlier Ramblers, would later become the industry standard. The suspension upgrades weren't just about handling the power. AMC recognized that making a car faster in a straight line meant nothing if it couldn't stop or corner safely. The heavy-duty shocks and anti-roll bars gave the Rebel predictable handling characteristics. The power brakes provided stopping power appropriate to the performance. In other words, this wasn't a parts bin special thrown together to win a race. It was a properly engineered performance sedan, carefully developed to work as a complete package. That approach showed respect for the buyer and for the demands of high-performance driving. Comparisons to the competition. Let's put the Rebel's performance in context by looking at what else was available in 1957. The Chevrolet Corvette with fuel injection, the one that beat the Rebel, cost $3,165 and seated 2 people. It was a sports car, not practical daily transportation. The Chrysler 300C, with its mighty 392 Hemi producing 375 horsepower, was priced at $4,929, nearly twice what the Rebel cost. While it had more power, it also weighed around 4,200 pounds, giving it a less favorable power-to-weight ratio. The Plymouth Fury, Dodge's performance offering, came with a 318 cubic inch V8 making 290 horsepower and cost $2,925. It was quick, but not Rebel quick in acceleration. Ford's answer to the performance market was the Thunderbird, but by 1957 it had grown softer, more focused on luxury than outright speed. The Fairlane 500 with the big 312 cubic inch V8 could be made quick with the right options, but it couldn't match the Rebel's out-of-the-box performance. What's striking is how the Rebel competed with, and often beat, cars that cost significantly more, came from much larger companies with vastly greater resources, and were specifically marketed as performance vehicles. The Rebel was almost accidental greatness, a what-if that actually happened. What collectors should know: for anyone interested in finding a 1957 Rambler Rebel today, be prepared for a challenge. With only 1,500 built, they're genuinely rare. Many were used as daily drivers and eventually worn out or scrapped. Survivors often ended up in the hands of Nash AMC enthusiasts who recognized their significance. When shopping for a Rebel, verify the car's authenticity. All genuine Rebels came in that distinctive silver metallic with gold trim. They all had the 327 V8, not the smaller engine. They all were four-door custom hardtops. Documentation is valuable. Any car with Motor Trend or other period coverage is especially desirable. The good news is that mechanical parts are available through AMC specialty suppliers. The 327 engine shared components with other AMC V8s, making rebuild parts accessible. Body parts are more challenging as they're Rambler specific, but the cars were relatively simple compared to later vehicles. Prices for restored examples typically range from $20,000 to $35,000, depending on condition and documentation. That's reasonable for a car this rare and historically significant. Unrestored project cars occasionally surface for considerably less, but expect to invest time and money in restoration. The broader picture. The Rebel story is really about innovation in the face of adversity. American Motors didn't have the resources to compete with General Motors or Ford in traditional ways. They couldn't afford the massive advertising budgets, the extensive dealer networks, or the frequent styling changes that characterized Detroit in the 1950s. So they innovated. They built compact cars when everyone else built land yachts. They focused on quality and value when others focused on chrome and flash. And when they decided to build a performance car, they did it smart, taking existing components and combining them in a way that produced something special without requiring massive investment. That's a lesson that resonates beyond the automotive world. Sometimes the best solutions come from constraints, not unlimited resources. Sometimes thinking differently matters more than thinking bigger. The 1957 Rambler Rebel proved that an underdog could win, at least for a moment. It showed that smart engineering could overcome a limited budget. And it demonstrated that Americans would respond to performance from unexpected sources, even if the marketplace didn't reward that performance immediately. So, there you have it, the story of the 1957 Rambler Rebel, the four-door sedan that shocked Daytona Beach and rewrote the rules about what a compact car could do. It beat nearly everything else on wheels that day, proving that a struggling independent automaker could compete with Detroit's giants. The Rebel may have lasted only 1 year in its high-performance form, but its influence echoed through the decades. Every muscle car that followed, from the GTO to the Roadrunner to the Rebel machine itself, owed something to those two AMC engineers who looked at a lightweight sedan and a big engine and asked, "What if?" Now I want to hear from you. Did any of you folks ever drive a 57 Rebel? Maybe you knew someone who owned one? Or perhaps you've got memories of other underdog performance cars that surprised everyone? Drop your stories in the comments below. Your experiences help build our community of car enthusiasts, and I love reading what you have to say. If you enjoyed this deep dive into automotive history, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss future episodes. And if you found this interesting, give us a thumbs up. It really helps the channel reach more folks who appreciate these forgotten stories from Detroit's golden age. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, keep the rubber on the road and the chrome shining.